my pleasure to say, Madam Vice President, welcome to Virginia, to Henrico County, and to the 9th Senate District. Virginia is the safe haven for abortion care in the South, and we are going to keep it that way, but it hasn't always been that way. A decade ago, as the first pregnant member of the House of Delegates, I fought abortion restrictions such as the transvaginal ultrasound, personhood bills, TRAP regulations, going so far as to read from my copy of what to expect while you're expecting on the House floor. Unfortunately, the majority at that time passed many of those restrictions, including the mandatory ultrasound and TRAP regulations. But in 2020, working with Delegate Charnel Herring and many people at this table, we repealed those medically unnecessary restrictions. Our Reproductive Health Protection Act made Virginia the first state in the South to expand access to abortion care, even while other states were enacting bans. The following year, Delegate Sally Hudson and I removed restrictions on abortion coverage through health plans sold in the healthcare exchange. Now that the Supreme Court has overturned Roe versus Wade, making me the first generation of my family to lose a right from the Supreme Court, we are fighting to protect the progress that we made and expanding on it, including working towards a state constitutional amendment to protect reproductive rights. But your reproductive rights should not depend on the state in which you live. And that is why we are so glad to have the Vice President here to listen to not only what we're doing here in Virginia, so that we can hear what she and Vice President Biden are doing to help protect access to reproductive health care. It is now my great pleasure to introduce someone who has fought for the health and safety and well-being of women for her entire career. Someone who has been leading the fight to protect reproductive rights from the White House, convening state legislators from across the country, including in Orlando, Philadelphia, Atlantic City, and Charlotte, to discuss how to protect reproductive health care in the states. Introducing someone who is looking forward to partnering with us on this important issue, it is my great pleasure to introduce Madam Vice President Kamala Harris.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator McClellan, and for your long-standing work on this issue. And thank you to all the leaders who are here. You are not only extraordinary leaders in this beautiful state, but you are national leaders on so many issues. And so I thank you for the time that you have taken for us to gather today to share information, to collaborate, and to, as appropriate, coordinate around this very important issue, which is that only weeks ago, the United States Supreme Court took a constitutional right that had been recognized from the American people, took a right from the American people, in particular the women of America. And this is no small matter in terms of what this means. Every day, starting with the day that decision came down, we have seen in our country extremist, so-called leaders who are, in many states, criminalizing healthcare professionals, punishing women, passing laws that will ban outright or essentially ban a woman's access to abortion care and reproductive care, with no exception in some states for rape or incest. And I will say, as a former prosecutor, I spent a large part of my career specializing in crimes against women and children, including child sexual assault. The idea that a so-called leader would pass a law that would prohibit someone who has already endured such an extreme act of violence from making decisions and having autonomy to make the decision about her own body is outrageous. On this issue, I think it is also important to recognize that You don't have to abandon your faith or your beliefs to agree that the government should not be making that decision for that woman. It may not be something you would choose to do, but let's all agree that when it comes to one of the most intimate decisions that a woman can make, intimate decisions that are about heart and home, she should be able to do that without the government telling her what to do. She should be able to do that, if she chooses, in consultation with her loved ones, with her physician, with her pastor, her priest, her rabbi, but not have the government telling her what she is supposed to do and what she doesn't have a choice to do. These are fundamental points. And here in Virginia, one of the founding principles for our nation was born, which is about our nation's commitment to a foundational and fundamental principle of freedom. Freedom. Liberty. These are the principles upon which our nation was founded, and these very principles are at stake. Not to mention what the Dobbs decision opened the door to in terms of other potential risks to freedoms, such as the freedom to marry the person you love, the freedom to have access to contraception. And interestingly enough, when you look at the Venn diagram on the issue of attacks in one circle, on a woman's freedom to make decisions about her reproductive health, you look at another on the issue of attacks on our LGBTQ plus community. You look at attacks on the freedom to vote. And you will not be surprised to see the intersection in terms of the same people in many of those situations doing all three of those things. So there is a lot at stake for a lot of people on this issue, and I am proud to be joined by such extraordinary leaders who are stakeholders, who are legislators, to talk about how we will stand for the American people and their rights. And with that, again, I thank you all this Saturday morning for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to introduce some of my colleagues that I'm proud to be in this fight with. First, we have the President Pro Tem of the Senate, our latest Twitter celebrity, Senator Louise Lucas of Portsmouth.
Thank you, Senator McClellan. I am L. Louise Lucas, and I represent the 18th Senatorial District, and I take a lot of honor and pride in being the first African-American and first woman President Pro Tem of the Virginia Senate. I serve as chair of Senate Education and Health Committee, where we will continue to hold a brick wall against bills restricting reproductive rights. Madam President, I take pride in the fact that one of my first floor speeches over 28 years ago in the Senate of Virginia was in support of codifying reproductive rights. And the reason why I took so much pride in that is because I am of the generation when women, especially black women, did not have access to reproductive choices. And I can tell you, I know personally some women who died and some who were personally injured as a result of having to seek back alley abortions. And as was stated by Senator McClellan, we are a safe haven here in Virginia, and we're going to fight like hell to make sure it stays that way. And so, Madam President, I'm here to welcome you and to join in this discussion. And I know with your leadership, we're going to make sure that women have access to reproductive rights. And I thank you.
Thank you, and I do want to also express greetings from President Biden to all of you for being here. If I just might, there's one point that I want to add after those important comments, which is the governor of Virginia I've read, says he will, quote, gleefully sign a law to take away reproductive rights. So I would also like to be clear that I'm fully aware of the context in which we meet in terms of what this will mean to the people of Virginia and what is at stake directly in this state in terms of their rights and their rights in particular as it relates to a governor who is apparently prepared to restrict and even ban abortion based on an interpretation of the words he spoke.
We will now hear from Senator Mamie Locke of Hampton, who is the chair of the Senate Democratic Caucus.
Thank you and welcome, Madam Vice President. As a child, I was victimized by sexual assault and incest. I am fortunate that no pregnancy resulted. This was in the pre-Roe era. I cannot even begin to imagine what would have happened if I had been forced to have a child at an early age. But for my entire adult life, Roe versus Wade was the law of the land. It is unfortunate that the consequences of the Supreme Court decision will be swift and devastating for so many communities. But what is most distressing in this post-Roe time is all the talk about banning abortions even in the event of rape or incest, irrespective of age. We have heard of the 10-year-old victim forced to travel to from Ohio to Indiana to get her abortion. Remarks made that even if 12-year-olds are raped or are victims of incest, they should be forced to have the child. Can you imagine the trauma that child will go through for the rest of her life? I cannot imagine my 10-year-old self in that situation. The people who will suffer the most harm from the Dobbs decision are those who disproportionately feel the effects of abortion bans and restrictions of this country's legacy of racism and discrimination. African Americans, the poor, indigenous, and people of color. Our job is to ensure that people should be able to make decisions about their bodies, lives, and futures without interference. We need to speak up in support of safe, legal abortions. It's more important than ever that our voices be heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Locke, for that powerful story. Now we will hear from Delegate Sally Hudson of Charlottesville.
Thank you, Senator McClellan, and welcome to Virginia, Madam Vice President. My name is Sally Hudson, and I serve Charlottesville in the House, and I am so proud of all of the work that we have done together to make Virginia a safe haven for abortion care. We will always fight to protect the rights of Virginians to seek abortion, and we welcome all of the patients who are already coming to Virginia to get the care that they need now that abortion is banned in their home states. But we also know that that influx of patients is already straining the limited provider network that we have. I'm fortunate to have abortion care providers in the district that I serve, but Charlottesville and Roanoke are the only two places outside of the urban crescent that have abortion providers. The vast majority of Virginians still live in a county without a clinic. And so we know that laws alone will never be enough to ensure that everyone can actually get the care that they need. Because abortion is health care, and that means that abortion patients face all of the same challenges that pervade our healthcare system, from provider shortages to insurance coverage. And we know that our Republican colleagues are already targeting the few providers we have, threatening physicians' licenses and funding for our public hospitals. So I'm looking forward today to discussing how we can work together to strengthen our provider network so that the laws we're working so hard to protect on paper mean that everyone can actually get the care they need in practice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Hudson. Next, we will hear from Delegate Candy Munden King of Dumfries.
Thank you. My name is Candy Munden King, and I am the Reproductive Freedom Policy Lead for the Virginia House Democratic Caucus. Madam Vice President, thank you so much for coming to our Commonwealth for this important conversation. I am one generation out of the sharecropping fields of Virginia and part of the first generation of women in my family to make decisions for my body. Our legislature is critical to ensuring we don't rewind the hands of progress back to the time when my 13-year-old grandmother was forced into motherhood. Whether it is women facing chronic illnesses where pregnancy could lead to death, or those who are finding their path after surviving sexual assault. Whatever the reason, healthcare decisions should be between people and their doctors. We are also looking forward to discussing today the connection between abortion access and Black maternal deaths. We cannot allow Virginia to be like other states where abortion was restricted and there was a 33% increase in Black maternal deaths. Our caucus is committed to this work. We are planning a policy agenda that will not only protect abortion and continue to be a safe haven for our neighbors, but to also protect providers, address telemedicine, because we know that abortion is essential health care, and we will make that clear to the governor and anyone else who is attempting to restrict those rights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate King. Next, we will hear from Delegate Michelle Maldonado of Manassas.
Thank you, Senator McClellan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Great. Thank you. Hello and good morning. Thank you. Welcome, Madam Vice President. Thank you for coming here today. My name is Michelle Maldonado, and I'm the delegate of the 50th District. And I currently serve as founding chair of the Virginia and Technology Innovation Caucus and chair of the Democratic Policy Committee on Affordable Housing. I'm a first-time legislator, and I'm here today, like many of you, because our Commonwealth and our country are in crisis. We have said that Roe v. Wade was the floor, not the ceiling, for abortion rights and more. But with the continued dismantling, we are left to urgently fortify these rights. And what we know from some of the data is that more than half of Americans support the right to abortion. So that means that deciding what happens to our bodies and when is a fundamental human right. And it's time for us to stop viewing abortion rights as a single moment in time issue, but instead speak more boldly, more succinctly, more frequently about it in the context of the spectrum that is lifelong reproductive health. Because after all, context matters. And at one level, this spectrum of reproductive health includes choice, but extends beyond that into birth control, education, health, and well-being, the right to work and the right to advance and flourish at work, as well as society's care of those who fail to thrive. The economic impact and trauma are borne by all of us, but especially by individuals who are the least resourced among us. And at another level, there's an impact that we don't talk about very much, but the impact of dismantling, peeling back, peeling away abortion and reproductive rights also impacts our workforce and the economy and our competitiveness. Whether it's women choosing not to go into the workforce, leaving the workforce, or staying at lower levels of leadership in the workforce, or whether it's Virginia losing its #1 spot as a place to do business in this country, or choosing to minimize their footprint in the Commonwealth or to not come to the Commonwealth at all. The way we treat women and people's reproductive rights matters to people and the businesses who hire them. Those same businesses that come here and fuel our workforce and our economy. So it's time for us to truly secure our choice, our access, and protection once and for all, so that people like Marlena Stell, who had to carry her fetus even after she was told it wasn't viable, never has to experience that kind of trauma again. And it's time for more of us to summon the moral courage to take wise and compassionate action in these perilous moments that build upon the good work of Virginia Democrats, such as our senators and delegates here today. Today's roundtable is an important step in that direction, and I'm so proud to be a part of the discussion to share our thoughts on needed laws, processes, and expanded protections as the number of states banning abortions mounts and persecution and prosecution of women and people, doctors and healthcare professionals are doing their jobs at great risk to personhood and safety. We owe them the right and autonomy to make the personal healthcare decisions that impact their lives, their health, and their futures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce one of our former colleagues in both the House of Delegates and the Senate, my predecessor in the Senate district, who we are all proud to watch him representing us in Congress. Congressman, I went through all his titles. Congressman Donald McEachin.
Thank you, Senator and Madam Vice President. Let me say once again, welcome to Virginia's 4th Congressional District. You know, I have some prepared remarks here, but they don't come close to matching the eloquence of what's already been said, and so I'm going to take a chance and scare my staff and depart from these remarks. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the politics of the situation, Madam Vice Chair, as you well know. To my colleagues here assembled, I say welcome, and it's so good to see you all, many of whom I've served with for years and some of whom I'm just getting to know. But quite frankly, Madam Vice President, this is the choir. These are the converted. We have a problem child in the Virginia Senate, and he's the one who needs to be here. He's the one who needs to hear the stories that have been shared. He's the one who needs to understand the importance of being pro-choice in this environment. So, Madam Vice President, there may come a time, and you may or may not be able to help us with this, but there may come a time when we need to have you have a chat with our problem child in the Senate. But beyond that, Madam Vice President, I join with you and with the President of the United States and with many of my colleagues in the CBC in calling upon our majority in the Senate right now, in the United States Senate right now, to make an exception to the filibuster rule. You don't have to do away with filibuster rule. That's fine. You don't want to do away with it. You don't want to do away with it. But the least we can do is say that filibuster shall not apply when we're talking about a person's civil rights, whether it's the right to control your body or the right to cast your vote. The filibuster should not stand in the way of that. And so, Madam Vice President, I again welcome you to the 4th Congressional District. I want to tell you how proud I am of the folks that are here assembled, particularly of the one who says that she's my successor in representing the 9th Senatorial District. The 9th Senatorial District has an illustrious history, Madam Vice President. We've produced a governor. We've produced a loser at a statewide level in me when I ran for Attorney General. We produced a near governor in terms of J. Sergeant Reynolds, who unfortunately died too early. We've produced members of the finance chair. But I tell you, without a doubt, Madam Vice President, the best senator from the 9th Senate District wears heels, and that's Jennifer McClellan. I yield back.
If I may, Congressman, on the issue of the filibuster, I could not agree with you more, nor could the President agree with you more, which is why our President, Joe Biden, has been very clear that he will not let the filibuster stand in the way on the issue of the Women's Health Protection Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and Freedom to Vote Act. So the President has been very clear, because we share in that sentiment, that attempts to obstruct critical legislation that are grounded in civil rights, as you say, should not win the day. But that is also why, in an election that is coming up in 108 days, we need 2 more senators in the United States Senate so that we are able to actually see this through. So I appreciate you raising these points. Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes the press portion of our conversation. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.